Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Maria. She has been an extension master gardener since 2017. In addition, she earned a certificate in sustainable urban agriculture from Virginia State in 2018. She is a permaculture farmer and owner of Carniola Farms, which is located on the eastern shore of Maryland. She plans to explore permaculture concepts and designs that will help you transform your small urban yard into your own food forest and help you to create an edible landscape while reducing your labor and investment and reducing your use of inorganic chemicals. And without further ado, Maria, welcome and take it over.
Well, thank you very much, Colleen. And hello, and thank you for everyone for being here. In winter, I think it's always a nice time to be discussing plants and trees and flowers and color. And going through this slide, preparing for this presentation reminds me of how colorful my farm was before the snow and the cold hit. So it's a good warm up for the season coming. Master gardeners and the Extension Cooperative Service, in addition to running a help desk, which Colleen just mentioned, it runs a number of hundreds of volunteers who serve Arlington and Alexandria. We provide public education on environmentally sound gardening practices. In addition to the help desk, we run plant clinics several times a year. We have many classes. This is one of them that run throughout the year. And we have a number of demonstration gardens that the master gardeners work in, and both in Arlington and Alexandria. So the overview for today, I'm going to give you a short introduction of my farm because most of the photos that I'll be showing you are from my farm, and it'll give you a little perspective in what it looks like. Then we'll discuss what permaculture is and why it's important. We'll go through the ethics and principles of permaculture. I'll discuss perennials extensively because they are the essence and extremely important in permaculture. We'll discuss a number of plants that you can use in our area, which is Zone 7. For those of you who are participating from outside of our area, some of the plants that I'll be discussing and recommending might not be suitable for your location. I'll discuss the principles of permaculture design and what insect and wildlife management is in a permaculture setting, which is different than modern agriculture. This is a photo from the street of my farm taken last June. We have 11 acres on the eastern shore of Maryland. We purchased it in 2019 from a corn farmer. In a year and a half before this photo was taken, I'll show you the slide later, it was a cornfield and there was nothing on it. Now, on the eastern shore, most landowners have flat land, and many of the farmers have ditches in their property to mitigate flooding, and it's very helpful. I've dedicated thus far 2 acres of my property to developing a permaculture style orchard. I have approximately 3 acres of wildflowers, and I will be developing a forest with nut trees, about 4 acres that I will dedicate to agroforestry production. In addition to that, I do have an area for annual vegetable gardens. Now, although this is my orchard, my trees are still small. So last June, because I don't use any synthetic chemicals, any sprays, I had a lot of wildflowers. This is Coreopsis come up, and this is what my orchard looked like last June. By July, it had been replaced with black-eyed Susans. And when I don't have a need for the space, unless the space is being taken up, if the space, I'm sorry, is being taken up by invasive plants or grass, I will simply let it grow. So there are trees growing amongst these flowers, but in the meantime, the flowers serve a very useful purpose, which is to suppress weeds, and also they thwart pests. This is the site of where I will be building up a forest. Now, this area was once forest before it was cleared, probably 200 some years ago. On the right, the photo you can see there, that's the edge of my property where there is some remaining forest. It borders a county creek. And I've decided to build my forest right next to the existing forest because it was unused probably for about 15 years before I bought the property. Although the soil is good, there are a lot of tree roots and milkweed, actually Indian hemp that grows in the summer that have really strong rhizomes and roots. And I found it necessary to put a tarp on for approximately 2 months in order to be able to even dig into the ground. There's so many roots. These tarps will be removed and replaced with wood chips in the near future. Where I don't have trees, most of my property is open land. And again, when not sprayed or mowed, native flowers come up. We see common milkweed on the left. And on the right, I did plant the white clover that you see in there, but the remaining flowers came up on their own. They are common milkweed, Indian hemp, which is a type of milkweed, many daisies, asters later in the future, buttercups, etc. What is permaculture? It is a combination of the two words permanent agriculture. And in more recent years, it has come to mean permanent culture. So now it means both. The founder of this term is Bill Mollison, an Australian who wrote his manual on permaculture design in 1988. He described permaculture as the aim is to create systems that are ecologically sound and economically viable, which provide for their own needs, do not exploit or pollute, and are therefore sustainable in the long term. Permaculture is an ecological design system for sustainability in all aspects of human endeavor. It teaches us how to design natural homes, abundant food production systems, regenerate degraded landscapes and ecosystems, develop ethical communities and economies, and much more. I'm going to mention agroforestry, which is a type of permaculture, only its purpose is always to be commercial. Agroforestry is the purposeful integration of trees within a farming landscape, which includes growing understory crops in the forest. And this is what I'm going to be doing with the forest that I'm planting. I want to grow mushrooms, medicine, golden seal, medicines, black cohosh, and there's a number of other uses for a shaded type of food forest. Why do we need permaculture? Well, it's something that's needed around the world, and I'm very glad to see that it's interest, that people are interested in the concept around the world. We need it because of water scarcity. Drought is threatening worldwide food production. We need it because of deforestation. Topsoil is washed away when forests are removed and habitats are destroyed. Permaculture design helps us to build forests to last centuries or millennia. If you think about it, before modern agriculture in the last 200 years or 500 years, when forests started getting eliminated, people did work in permaculture type systems. Our ancestors, people who in the United States inhabited this country before the last 400 years, they worked in permaculture style systems. We need permaculture because of soil degradation. Half of the world's topsoil has been lost in the past 150 years due to farm practices and lack of soil understanding. And finally, we need permaculture because of pollution. Pollution is a design problem or mismanagement of resources. Almost all waste can be taken back in a natural cycle as long as we manage it properly, and that we don't also create and release substances that do not cycle. I want to quote from a book, which I like very much. It's on by a geographer. I like geographers. My father was a geographer. It was written in 1929. It's called Tree Crops, a Permanent Agriculture. And J. Russell Smith traveled the world as a geographer and had this observation when he reached China. He had already visited Europe and seen how the mountains and slopes in Europe, particularly Corsica, still had all their trees on them, and how well they handled agroforestry and permaculture in Europe. But in certain countries, he saw it very differently. In China, for example, the farmers of the past generation had cleared the forest. They had plowed the sloping land and dotted it with hamlets. Year by year, the rain has washed away the loosened soil. The hamlets in my valley below the Great Wall are shriveled and gone. Only gullies remain, a wide and sickening expanse of gullies, more sickening to look upon than that of fire. You can rebuild after a fire. Forest, field, plow, desert, that is the cycle of the hills under most plow agricultures. And this is not limited to China. China has a deadly expanse of it, but so have Syria, Greece, Italy, Guatemala, and the United States. Indeed, we Americans, though new upon our land, are destroying soil and the fields far faster than any people have ever lived. He goes on to say that planting corn is the most efficient known way for destroying a farm. Corn is the killer of continents and one of the worst enemies of the human society in the future. So when we're talking about a monoculture, here is an example of that. Vast acres of fields of usually wheat, corn, cotton, with no diversity in sight. That in itself causes enormous problems, not just for the soil in this particular farm, but in combination with monocultures all over the United States, it causes a problem for us globally. This is a photo of my farm shortly after I purchased it in 2019. On the left side is primarily where my property is. It's a former cornfield. I took soil tests when I first purchased it. There were low levels of nutrients. The soil was depleted. I started digging. I found no worms and no insects. Furthermore, on the property, there were no birds and no bees. There are three primary permaculture ethics. It's care for the earth, care for people, and the need to reinvest the surplus that this care creates. There are 12 permaculture principles first written by Bill Mollison. Many others have modified, added to that, reduced that, but I've produced the original 12 right here. The first is to observe and interact. Let's say, for example, you have a small quarter-acre urban lot. You probably already have a tree or more in it, hedges, some shrubs. You may have some grass or combination of weeds with grass and some pathways. Look at what elements are present before you start changing everything and what you have. Examine the soil. We master gardeners always recommend that you get soil tests, which are available through our office. That will tell you the type, the texture of your soil, the pH level, the organic content of it. Part of the observation includes considering what climate you're in. We're in zone 7, but you also have microclimates, which are created by certain conditions. We'll go over those. You have to look at the availability of your light. If your backyard is, as mine is in Arlington, covered with trees, you have limited number of fruit trees that you can plant because you don't have enough sunlight. Look at the existing vegetation in your yard and also your neighbors. Much of the shade in our yard is caused by the trees in by our neighbors. What are the wind conditions? And observe and consider all these elements before you make big changes into your property. The second principle is to catch and store energy. Every difference in your site, every condition, every seasonal pattern offers you an opportunity. Stored rainwater is an opportunity to store water for future crops. If you have trees, it's an opportunity to store the biomass of a forest or the trees. It represents a living storage for building materials, fuel, nutrients, and water. You can manage stormwater runoff, which is an issue in our community in Arlington and Alexandria. And you can manage it with rain barrels, creating swales and rain gardens. You can keep organic materials on site by composting or mulching, and you can use biological and renewable sources locally sourced. The third principle is to attain a yield rather than just growing ornamental plants, which I love. I have plenty of ornamental plants, but you can mix in diverse yields of food. You can grow vegetables, both perennial vegetables and annual vegetables, mixed in with marigolds and numerous other annuals and perennial shrubs. The fourth principle is to apply self-regulation and accept feedback. Live simply and consciously. It doesn't make sense under permaculture to make designs and keyhole gardens, for example, if on the other hand, you are not paying attention to the emissions that your work creates. The fifth principle is to use and value renewable resources, which replenish with modest use. For example, you could plant fruit trees downslope if you have a forest or a number of trees above your property. And that way you can take advantage of the nutrients and the water that drift down from that hill or slope. Pictured my farm. This is a ditch running down the middle of this photograph. The forest is to the farm at the top of the screen on the photo. But there are a number of small sweet gum trees growing in this ditch. The ditches are created to control flooding, and I'm actually not allowed to have a forest build up in this ditch. I'm not planting these sweet gum trees. The birds are helping me populate my forest. But what I can do, I can allow these trees to grow up to about 4 inches in diameter, and then I can cut them down and use to inoculate for my mushroom program. And I'm going to do this rather than use the county's herbicide treatment program. They come by every so applied herbicides and kill all the vegetation growing in the ditch. The sixth principle is to produce no waste, or produce as little as you can. In Arlington and Alexandria, of course, we have a recycling program. We're encouraged to compost and reuse materials. I put eggshells in a separate box so they can dry, and I can crush them well and add them to my compost pile. I use all the paper towels rather than throw them away. I shred them and add them to the compost pile. And on the right is one of my compost bins or piles before I started filling it up. And I use this, although there are plastics there, this is an example of reusable material. I have leftover patches of landscape fabric. I have broken metal stakes because I have a deer, a perimeter fence around my property to keep out the deer so they don't eat all my trees while they're trying to grow. And I have scraps of deer mesh fence. So put together, this is a compost bin used from recyclable materials. Very simple. Anyone could make something like that. The seventh principle in permaculture is to design your garden, your system to maximize connections. You want to design it first and then apply it. In permaculture, we often talk about 5 zones. The zone 0 in the center of the picture is your house. Zone 1 would be the area immediately outside your home. That's a good place to put plants that you want to have access to on a daily basis. If you're growing herbs, lettuce, annual vegetables, if you take cut flowers, that's where you would put them. You'll have a patio in zone 1 and storage areas. For me, the compost bin is very important to have close to the house because I am going out there every day. In zone 2 or 3, you'll put fruit and nut trees, brambles, which would be raspberries, blackberries, perennial vegetables, and plants that do not need daily attention. They have multifunctional uses. Most urban lots will have no more than 3 zones. The 4th zone, as in the picture, would be agricultural animals, cows. We're not allowed to keep those in Arlington. And the 5th zone, which I have on my farm, would be a wild area left for animals, untouched. I leave that for the deer and the other animals and just let grow what wants to grow. The 8th principle is to integrate rather than segregate. The idea behind this is that the stronger the relationship is between these systems, the stronger your overall system becomes. For example, a tree has multiple benefits. It absorbs air pollutants, produces oxygen, cools your property. It might increase your property value. It provides habitats for mammals, birds, insects. It intercepts storm water. If we all had trees in Arlington, we would probably have fewer flash flooding problems. Trees also provide food. Another example of maximizing the benefits would be to create a vine-covered arbor to shade an outdoor living space. And at the same time, that will attract pollinators and produce fruit. The 9th principle is to use small and slow solutions. When I start inoculating logs for mushrooms, it will spread mushrooms around and provide mushrooms for years to come. I won't get mushrooms the first year. If you plant a new nut tree in an area cleared by modern agriculture, it will provide food in the future. You're not going to get it in the first year. It will also help in a slow manner to reduce flooding. The 10th principle is to use and value diversity. Here pictured is a small lot. It houses a lot of functions. One small lot can house water storage, composting, forestry, an orchard, gardens, wind power, gray water, a small pond for fish, chicken for eggs, and fertilizer. It's all a matter of planning. The 11th principle is to use edges and value the marginal. In your urban garden, you can add, if you don't already have, edible hedgerows, or you can replace ones you have. Many hedgerows that have been put into our gardens are non-native, and some of them actually have berries that can kill birds. We can also create microclimates, especially in an urban environment. The ponds will often raise the grow zone for plants immediately adjacent to the pond by one zone. For example, you'd be able to grow plants or tree that normally would not survive in our climate. They might be zone 8, but they likely would survive if they are planted in a microclimate. On the right side is a picture of my farm. I've planted an olive tree that's normally grown in zone 8. And our climate is too warm for that normally, but I have planted it next to the house. And thus far, even in the snow, it's doing well. Edges on our properties present challenges, but you can use it to your advantage. And that is the purpose of this principle. The 12th principle is to creatively use and respond to change. Plan for a more productive ecosystem and anticipate that change. With the snow we had last week, this is what my orchard looked like. The farm came with a bit of a dip in the orchard, caused by a lot of tractors compacting the soil, and so water will pool in this area. I have been planting trees that don't mind flooding and sitting in water. For example, persimmon trees will grow in it. And pawpaw trees will do well too, and that's what I'm planting in this area. However, if I repair it and I am adding a lot of wood chips to my orchard in this former cornfield, I should anticipate that in the future, this may no longer flood after I have made those changes. Those are the 12 principles. Do we have any questions so far?
Yes, indeed, we do. The first question was from someone who wanted to know how you're processing your medicinal plants. Are you drying them and taking them to market, or what are you doing with them, I guess?
Well, that's a great question. And the answer is that I'm not processing them yet because I am waiting to build up my forest before I plant the cohosh and the golden seal. They really require a good amount of shade. And as you saw from the photos in my property, I don't have enough yet. However, in the future, I will be drying them, and possibly I'll be looking for a local market to sell it at, probably through my farm and website, and then possibly through one buyer or a specialty grocery store.
Okay, great. Another listener asked if you could expand a little on the bad effects of corn.
Oh, that's one of those long answers that actually I would prefer to answer in the chat box after this session is done.
Okay.
There are some questions that will just take too long, but my point in short, very short, in raising that issue is not that eating a piece of corn is bad in and of itself, but it is the method, say in the United States, in which we farm it, where we deforest an area and then replace it with a monoculture, one plant, which whenever we have a monoculture, that will requires many inputs, principally synthetic chemicals, that over the years degrades and deplete the soils so that many, many more additives in the form of fertilizers needed to be added. See, in a permaculture style garden, outside fertilizer doesn't have to be added. And the more and more the soil is degraded, the more and more fertilizer needs to be added, to the point where the cornfields produce less and less, and this is what they have noticed over the decades. And also, as I explained in the initial concerns regarding pollution, the soil degradation, topsoil degradation, not just in the United States, but in the world, the monocultures are what are creating those problems. And I'll answer more in the chat.
Well, that was a pretty good answer right there. Thank you. Maria, do you have, someone asked about, do you have any more information on the urban agriculture certificate program?
Yes, and I can post that later in the chat box.
Okay.
It's offered in short through Virginia State University. I intended in person, but it's online right now due to COVID. And it is a urban sustainable and urban agriculture program. I don't know if that's exactly how it's written, but I will put that in the chat box.
Okay. Another questioner wanted to know if you could suggest understory plants for a fruit tree orchard.
Oh, yes. And that is the next section.
Okay, well, let's
Can
save
wait.
it then.
Because I have a lot of photos.
Okay. How about, do you have suggestions for shrubs to add to a northern bayberry hedgerow?
There's probably a number of them you can add. Let's go through the photos that I have and then see if that's still a question.
Okay.
I'll be talking about that.
Is terracing a sloping hillside part of the permaculture ethos?
It would be if your slope is bare, because of course we don't want to lose the topsoil. If your slope, however, is full of trees, it's unlikely not needed. If it's bare, then yes. And I have a photo coming up of rose bushes in our backyard, which is very slopey. And we have terraced the entire backyard.
Okay, I think we can move on.
Okay, great. So let's talk about why permaculture focuses on perennials. In short, we do it to reduce the amount of work. Many people actually will ask me when I have many perennials in my front yard, how is it that I work so much when they don't realize that I don't? And they think that gardening is a lot of work. Well, it's because we create showcases of unnatural gardening methods. The front lawn is the number one big problem, and also the big reason why gardening in our area in Arlington, Alexandria, is a lot of work. Front lawns require people to mow. If they're trying to maintain it green year round, they'll put in a lot of additives, fertilizers, and bare soil is another problem, and that results from unnatural gardening methods. Monocultures are, if you have only lawn, that's a monoculture. If you are treating the lawn or fruit trees, then with the chemical dependence, that creates a problem. Not having enough perennials is a big problem, and disturbing the soil is as well. We have this ethos that we need to work in the garden, but if planned correctly, after you have established a perennial type or permaculture garden, you will have much less work. It will be maintaining it, which is very different than working in it all the time. So how does nature do it? Well, nature works with dynamic relationships. Soil is rarely disturbed. For example, this is an urban garden. It's been created by someone, but the path is wood chips, and presumably there are wood chips around each one of these perennial plants. They have a combination of short to medium trees with perennial plants around. They might throw in some annual plants, but if it's a limited amount, that's less work. In this sort of a plan, soil is rarely disturbed. The soil was disturbed when each one of these plants was put in the ground, but has not been disturbed since. They'll probably add some wood chips every few years, but they're not disturbing the soil when they add it. You put in a plant for every niche. If there's a little corner, you might want to put a small plant in that area, one that fits your property. The goal is to have a polyculture, not a monoculture. You don't want to plant the same shrub throughout your entire garden. That's a great way to attract a particular type of pest. You want checks and balances, and that's best done by having the widest range of plants that you can think of or get. By adopting this system, the fertility and structure are constantly improved because nature works to improve the fertility of the soil in this manner. You do not have to add a thing to it, no fertilizers. Picture a forest. It grows by itself. It's mostly perennials. Nobody works in it, or they work very little. Plan your garden as if it were a forest. Get rid of your grass. Number one, if you want a green lawn, plant clover instead. I planted a lot of white clover in the orchard I showed you. That was a cornfield, and I did that initially to put nitrogen back into the soil that was so greatly depleted. Over about a year, the clover has added a lot of nitrogen to the soil already. And then when I want to plant a tree or shrubs, I simply remove it. You don't need to mow clover if you want to use it as a lawn, or you can mow it a little bit, and you don't need any fertilizer. Another way to get rid of your lawn, put in perennial plants. Grasses in our area, what most people use, they use non-native grasses, and it requires inputs for including fertilizer and mowing. If you plant low maintenance perennial shrubs, herbaceous plants, and bulbs, they will come back every year. This is an example of something in my front yard maybe a few years ago. People will come by and say, oh, you must have worked so much on that. And they don't realize that that year I wasn't even home. It just comes up by itself because they're perennials. It's a combination of lavender. I have rosemary somewhere else. These are bulbs, alliums, irises. I do have one hydrangea here. Maybe that's not the best place, but it is a sun tolerant hydrangea. Might have, can't see them all, but they're all perennial shrubs I've had a number of years. Occasionally I might need to trim one, but that's it. This was our backyard a few years ago. If you don't mind some maintenance and you like ornamental plants, you can replace your lawn with ornamentals. However, in this rose garden, it's not just roses. This is a permaculture style rose garden because it has comfrey, which I will discuss in a later slide, planted throughout to provide nutrients for the roses. It has many, many herbs growing throughout. Herbs are particularly good because they have a scent and they thwart pests that would otherwise be chewing down your plants and your roses. We have no sprays on the rose bushes whatsoever. Might occasionally, once a year, add some organic fertilizer, and that's it. Otherwise, it takes care of itself. If you want to keep your green, you could also plant strawberries instead of grass. They are green most of the time, except if you get June-bearing strawberries, they'll have flowers in spring, strawberries in June, and it'll be green the rest of the time. Our next section of discussion is permaculture plants and their functions. We want to talk about these different kinds of plants and what they're used for. A functional plant are plants that provide nitrogen to other plants around them. We call them nitrogen fixers, and I will have slides on those. Another type of functional plant is nutrient accumulators and green mulches. Then there are plants that are insectaries. They will attract the butterflies and the bees. We have plants that host pollinators, and we have bulbs. Crop plants include trees, shrubs, vines, brambles, which are blackberries and raspberries among them, perennial vegetables, herbs, and then we can mix in annual crops that might naturalize. By that, I mean annual crops that might drop seeds, and then the plant simply continues in the same spot without you having to do anything with it or replant it. So the first type of a functional plant are nitrogen fixers. These are very important in a permaculture style garden or farm, because they provide nitrogen to trees and plants that need it through mycorrhizal fungi. Mycorrhiza is a system underneath the ground whereby, once established, the nitrogen fixing plants, for example, the false indigo bush here, will provide nitrogen to a tree nearby that needs it. It's really quite magical when you think about it. If you have a small garden, these are plants that are very suitable for a small garden. False blue from the top, going clockwise, false blue indigo, and then there's a partridge pea, which is normally an annual. You might have to replant that every year. It depends on whether you have a microclimate or not. Beans are very good. Nitrogen fixers, those are, you'll have to replant those every year. Peanuts, red clover. This is a type of clover that grows taller than the white clover that I showed you earlier. These are very appropriate, not for instead of a lawn, but for growing in the middle of your permaculture orchard or garden and planted next to trees and shrubs that you want to provide nitrogen for. And then there is a native wisteria. Most of the wisterias in the area are non-native and actually invasive, but there's an American wisteria, if you get it, which is beautiful. We have it in one of our master gardener gardens. That can be trellised along the fence. These are more nitrogen fixers. These are photos from my garden. Clover going from the top counterclockwise. Clover will stay on the ground low down and fix nitrogen. Then there's a Siberian pea shrub. This doubles not only as a nitrogen plant, but it actually produces edible peas or bean-looking plants. The bottom right is a fascinating plant. It's called a sea buckthorn or sea berry. These are highly nutritious, highly antioxidant berries, very high in vitamin C, the orange berries, but it's also a nitrogen fixing shrub. You can use this shrub interplanted among trees to help with the nitrogen for the fruit trees that you have. And then the center is a gumi plant. That's a standard permaculture type nitrogen fixing plant. Again, the berries are edible. I actually don't collect these berries. I leave them for the birds, because I want birds in my property because they provide wonderful services. They eat the pests that I don't want on my fruit trees. And then finally, some dogwoods are nitrogen fixing plants. I want to move to a functional plant. And I want to just individually talk about the comfrey. This is the #1 plant for any permaculture style garden. Why? It accumulates nutrients and shares with nearby plants and trees. It's perennial. You plant it once and it will be there. It will also expand rapidly. I use this for what we call chop and drop. I use the leaves, I cut them, and I use them in several ways. You can quickly cut the leaves and then take them to the base of a tree or fruit tree, and that will immediately add nutrients. Well, it will easily add nutrients to those trees when the leaves decompose. You just cut them in place and take them to the tree, drop them right there, and you've got your nutrients. You don't have to go and get an extra fertilizer. Additionally, I make comfrey tea with comfrey. I take a number of the leaves, I stuff them into a 5-gallon container, add water, and then put a lid on it, leave it for about a month, and I have concentrated comfrey tea. I can take that and then take a watering can and add maybe a cup of the concentrated fertilizer to the can, and I have an instant fertilizer to take to my annual plants. Additionally, bees love this plant. Another way to propagate it is, if you have a big plant, is to cut up the roots of the plant and then cut the roots into 1 or 2 inch sections. And that's very easily planted even in winter. In fact, you could probably order them now from a supplier and get comfrey, certainly by spring, to plant in the ground by root cutting. More functional plants. These plants also accumulate nutrients. Common yarrow, I have a lot of that growing natively on my farm. You can also, they sell it at all the stores, at the nurseries in the area. Rhubarb, on the far right, is a perennial vegetable plant. So once you plant it, it'll come back every year, but it will accumulate nutrients. Additionally, of course, it can be used as a vegetable. Wild strawberry on the bottom is a perennial plant and a nutrient accumulator. You can also plant buckwheat and parsley. Those are annual plants. You would need to reseed them every year, but buckwheat produces an absolute wonderful flower that the bees love. And then there are also some flowers in this category. Moving on to other functional plants, insectaries. These are extremely important. The anise hyssop on the bottom left, I use all over my orchard. I'm a beekeeper, so I do want to provide many flowers for bees, but additionally, it has a scent that keeps pests away from fruit trees, because I don't spray my fruit trees. Wild bergamot in the center is another one. A lot of butterflies and bees all over these plants. Dill on the upper right supposedly is an annual plant, but I find that once I have it in the ground, it comes back every year. And also English lavender attracts a lot of bees, butterflies, insects. And I didn't mention the goldenrod on the upper left is a very important plant for pollinators, especially bees. Beekeepers know very well what goldenrod is. Very important in the fall when fewer flowers are blooming, and it's very important for the insects and pollinators at that time of the year. So if you plan or hope to grow food in your edible garden, you will want to plant a number of scent plants to ward off the pests from your fruit trees. Generally, the brambles, raspberries, blackberries, and to some extent blueberries have, especially native blueberry plants, will have fewer of the pests on them. What I found to be extremely successful is on the left. That's on the bottom. That plant is wormwood. I have many of those plants, and I try to plant one next to every fruit tree because I noticed there are fewer or no pests next to the fruit trees where that plant is growing tall. In the middle, top middle, that is Virginia mountain mint. That can spread quite quickly, so you need to keep an eye on it. I initially got it as a beekeeper because it's a critical plant in late July and August, when many other flowers have stopped blooming. For beekeepers, we're always looking for plants, flowers that the bees can use during what we call a drought. But additionally, it's a tremendous plant to have in your orchard near fruit trees, because it will attract the insects that will also, including wasps, that will thwart the pests on your trees. I like to have a beautiful garden as well. So I'll use colorful salvias pictured here, red, lavender, and they come in a number of other colors. More functional plants include butterfly weed, which is an important plant if you want to see the monarch butterfly in your yard. Common blue violet, ramps, nodding onion, daffodils I use that because they keep deer away, and I have it across the front of my property. And other functional plants like this, particularly perennials, which these are certainly worth considering putting in your permaculture garden. Now, moving on for trees for fruit. In general, if you can find a native fruit tree, you will have fewer pests on it, which you've probably noticed if you have fruit trees. On the bottom left is a pomegranate. That's not native, but it is a fruit that is available in the late fall, which can be very useful if you're trying to spread out your fruit so that you have fresh fruits and vegetables growing pretty much all year. Clockwise from the top left, there's an Asian persimmon. Now, there is a native persimmon that many people don't know about, the American persimmon. It grows very tall, though, after many years. I have a number of them, but they will have virtually no pests on them. The Asian persimmons are normally what you will see in some supermarkets. The top center is a flowering service berry. I use this a lot because it is also a nitrogen fixer. So I have it planted in between my fruit trees, but it produces small fruits pictured on the top right, again, which are edible, but I will leave them. I don't have any blooming yet because I've just planted them, but I will be leaving them for the birds. The American plum, there are a number of plum trees that you can choose, but if you choose an American plum tree, you will have fewer pests. Incidentally, I buy these very cheaply from the Maryland State Nursery at $1 or $2 a tree. So the American plum flowering there, it has small plums that are edible. And it won't, it supposedly, I don't have a big enough tree yet, but purportedly it will not have major pest problems. And there's a dwarf peach that's available. I did not note any pest problems on mine that will fit in your garden and also provide you peaches. Now, let's go over some shrubs that are available that have produced fruits. The top left is spice bush. That's available in most of the nurseries. I've seen it there. Fig tree. This particular one is Violette de Bordeaux. There are a number of fruit trees. Some are a little more hardy for our area. Chicago hardy would be one. This particular one in the top center is planted next to the house, which, as we've discussed, is a microclimate. Figs normally grow comfortably in zone 9, 2 zones warmer than we are. So you have a better chance of the figs surviving the winters when they're small before they really get established, if they're planted in a microclimate. And also, you might get more fruit later in the fall when it begins to get cold if you have it in one of your microclimate areas. Rose hips on the top right are also edible. Those are simply letting your roses become rose hips without picking them. Gumi, which I had pictured before on the bottom right, and huckleberry in the center, and then low bush blueberry. You can also grow high bush blueberry well in our area. More trees and shrubs if you have some room for them. The advantage of planting nut trees over another type of tree is that you will have nuts. You will produce your own food. We had a hazelnut growing up in my backyard when I was little. We got hazelnuts every year until the squirrels discovered them. We have a squirrel problem in Arlington, so I'm not guaranteeing you're going to get a big harvest if you plant them. Native also here, the American hazelnut and chinkapin shrubs and nuts are native in our area, also available through the Maryland State Nursery very cheaply. Some vines you can grow in your garden. For fruit, on the left are hardy, called Jenny, kiwis. There are several different kinds that are hardy in our area that you can trellis. They have they trellis very tall, so it's a good idea if you could plant it in the backyard and trellis it up the house or along the fence. A number of grapes can be trellised well in our area. I don't see too many people growing passion fruit, which is on the far right. That will grow well in our area. And then another grape on the bottom. Muscadines will grow well, particularly well in our region. Brambles, which are the fruiting vines of common blackberry. You can buy a thornless blackberry, raspberry. There are also tayberry. There's a number of other ones, but these are very hardy. They'll produce a lot of fruit and have virtual no pest problems. I had a number of grasshoppers, but that's because I have a big farm, in the fall eating some of the leaves, but they didn't touch the trees. They didn't harm anything. And moving on, many people don't consider vegetables to be perennial, but there are actually a great deal of them. They're just not seen in stores, and many people, in fact, until I started studying this, I was also unaware. Now, we're familiar with asparagus, but some of the other ones might be less familiar to you. Moving counterclockwise from the asparagus is the Maximilian sunflower. Sunflowers, of course, can produce sunflower seeds, and many of the flowers are also edible. The ramps are in the top right there. They usually need shade, so shady areas, that would be a good place to plant that. Turkish rocket. Then there's rhubarb, which we've discussed, French sorrel, prickly pear cactus, which can sometimes be tricky to grow, to establish. Both the cactus and the fruit are edible. And then there are strawberries, not just the wild strawberry, but all kinds of strawberries. They're considered perennial because plants will live 5 years or so. Now I'm trying to plant as many perennial vegetables in my garden as I can. On the left, going from the left, on a slight trellis, that's a ground nut. That produces a tuber, which I haven't dug up yet because I want it to get really established, but that's an edible tuber. To the right of that is a cardoon. It looks like an artichoke, which is also a perennial vegetable, but it's the leaves that you want to harvest. If they are cooked, they can be used as an edible vegetable, and also they can be harvested in winter. Mine are still green at this time of year throughout the snow. To the right of that is miner's lettuce. Once established, it is a perennial lettuce. I caution you though, it really does need quite a bit of shade to grow well, and it needs to be watered when it's first established. To the right of that are Jerusalem artichokes. They're what look like the tall sunflowers. These have what we've been referring to multi-functions. This serves as a beautiful flower in the summer, usually July, mostly August. But then the Jerusalem artichoke is a tuber then that can be dug up and then eaten. It's a winter vegetable. You want to wait until after the first frost. It'll taste even better then. And if you leave it in the ground, it'll be quite aggressive. So if you want to control it, you've got to keep an eye on where it's going. But planted once, it can produce this vegetable for years to come without you having to add anything to it. And at the bottom, I have a walking onion. It's an onion. It's called a walking onion or Egyptian onion because there's little onions at the top of the flower. That's where it's growing. And if you drop them, or it'll drop down to the ground by itself, it will then produce even more onions from you and more plants. You plant it once, you don't have to plant it again. Less work. And finally, a couple more vegetables. Watercress at the left. It's a perennial for me. I have really some waterlogged sections of my farm. They come up completely on their own. You can plant them by seeds. They'll be ready in March, and you have an early perennial lettuce. In the center is a tree collard. You normally aren't going to find those at nurseries. They can be ordered. But that is a perennial plant, eaten somewhat like a collard, kale, more like. And you simply, if you have several of these plants, you can propagate from one plant. It's perennial, and then you just simply cut some leaves, allow the plant to keep growing. Now, this will not overwinter in our area. You probably need to put it in a pot or dig it up and bring it inside for the winter. And on the far right is an artichoke. I intend to have a whole field in my orchard of artichokes interplanted between the trees this season. I want to add that some annual vegetables can be overwintered and used as produce during the winter. Now, we master gardeners put on a number of classes, and one of them is on how you can create covers to grow a number of cold, hardy vegetables over winter. But there are some of them that you don't even need to provide a cover for. I had planted seeds, I don't know, some in spring, most of them in fall probably, in some of my vegetable beds, and then I ignored them or forgot about them. So last week I went and dug a number of them up. The carrots look great, turnips, parsnips, rutabagas, and mini greens will survive throughout the winter, still in the ground. If you want to plant it that way, you can have fresh vegetables and just go dig them up. I took a picture of some potatoes because somehow some of my potatoes seem to be still alive, but normally by the time it snows, it's probably a bit too cold for those. I mentioned before, but these look different. Jerusalem artichokes on the far right here, that's what the tuber looks like when it's dug up. Out of one plant, I got 15 pounds of these tubers, and they're absolutely delicious. You can use them instead of potatoes. They have less, you have to cook them before you eat them, like potatoes, but they have a lot less starch than do potatoes. And in the center, that's a cardoon again. Perennial herbs need to be a part of every garden, certainly a permaculture garden. From the top left, we have lavender, winter savory, growing clockwise, French tarragon, thyme, chives, rosemary, purple sage. These are wonderful culinary plants, but they will attract enormous amount of bees and other pollinators, and they will help protect your fruit trees and shrubs. There are a number of heirloom herbs, also vegetables. I mentioned a few of these before that can naturalize, meaning you can leave them in the ground and the likelihood is that they're going to come up on their own next spring. Thai chili, that one is kept in a pot to use year round. Lettuce, that likely won't survive the winter. There's parsley, cilantro, a dill will likely come back the next year. So we'll stop for some questions. Do we have any, Colleen?
Yes, we have actually quite a few. I'm going to start with one that's left over from the last session. Two people asked, can you use rain barrel water from the roof to irrigate edibles?
In general, yes. If you are managing your gutters well. Now, many people leave debris and soil. which comes from degrading leaves. If you keep it very clean, yes, I would say so.
Okay. Another questioner asked, how do you balance the need for using native plants to regenerate your soil with sometimes growing non-natives for food?
Oh, I use both. That's a great question, because many of the fruit trees are not native to this area. Some are. And I use others that are not, knowing that they may require more care. I may need to spray them with kaolin clay. So I would say it's a balance. You don't want to plant shrubs that are invasive or that are dangerous to wildlife. Let's say that produce toxic berries. I would definitely avoid some of the nandina, some of the Japanese plants that can kill the birds. But if if you want to use them, they function well. Permaculture is not about only using native plants. People practicing permaculture will use, exactly as you described, a balance of native and non-native.
Okay. Do you have any red bud growing on your farm? And would you recommend that?
Yes, I do, actually. I didn't mention it. Some people describe it as a nitrogen fixer, but actually some studies have shown that it doesn't share nitrogen well with nearby trees. It is a native, beautiful small tree. I think it's ideal for the small type of urban lots that we find in Arlington and Alexandria. And again, that's a tree that you might be able to get for free from Arlington County, Audubon. I purchased 25 from Maryland State Nursery. So I like them a lot.
Okay, that brings up another question. You buy your plants from the Maryland State Nursery, but do you have to buy a large quantity?
Yes, you do. But if you have friends, you can share them.
Okay. You mentioned hazelnut trees. Are there any other nut trees you'd recommend for?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how big your property is. I mentioned hazelnut because it's actually used as can be used as a wonderful hedgerow. You can trim it. It's not going to hurt the plant. You get hazelnuts from them. What was the question again, Colleen? There was
Any
something
other
else.
nut
And
trees?
others
that you'd
ones.
recommend?
Yes, I'm planting, but these require space, chestnuts, a hybrid from Chinese chestnuts, because the American chestnut has been suffering from blight for 100 years. The chinkapin, pecan that can grow relatively quickly. You might have to be careful where you plant it. It's not going to like a really wet feet. I would encourage you to plant any nut tree that you think you can grow on your property. I think they're wonderful.
Okay. Do you happen to know the lifespan of a plum tree?
Oh, I don't off the top of my head. I can put that in the chat box
They
later.
can
Okay.
probably look it up. Yeah.
Yep. And also it's going to be different. You have a particular plum in mind?
I think it was American plum.
Oh, okay, good. All right, I'll get back to you on that one.
And how do you deal with walking onions? How do you eat it? What do you dig up?
I would let it establish itself for a while. You can cook it just the same as you would the annual onions that you buy. The only difference is that it's smaller.
Okay.
I would let it establish though, so that you don't just have one onion plant. The first crop, I would actually take apart the top and plant those little onion sets and let it multiply, and then just harvest it when you need it. It won't be available in winter though. It'll die back and then it'll come back. So use it during the blooming year.
Okay. Do you have any hints for someone who needs to protect their artichokes from critters and has tried a lot of barriers that haven't seemed to work?
Yeah, critters, that's a problem for everybody, I think. Um, people can try a variety of methods. The surest way is to put up a physical barrier, such as a metal cage around it. Now, that doesn't look very beautiful. I've seen some people who actually build a cage for half of their backyard so that no birds can even get in from the top. Now, that's not a problem for the artichoke. Sometimes some of the sonar animal sonar devices work but it depends on what kind of critter is coming, but they can repel critters that can hear the sounds. But I wouldn't recommend it really in small urban areas because that may bother the cats and dogs in the area as well.
Yeah.
Probably you're going to need to put up a physical barrier of some kind. I have a variety of them. I can't keep out all the deer on my property. I'm always working on it. Yeah, we have a problem with that too in Arlington. I have a mesh fence to keep those kind of critters out, but that won't keep out the raccoons, squirrels. I've skunks. My biggest problem is the groundhog, which you don't have. And I have an electric fence around my vegetable garden just because of the groundhogs. There's no other way to keep them out. They're vegetarians and they will eat everything.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have you had problems with things like persimmon, pawpaws, elderberries, lamb quarters, amaranths taking over where they're planted? I mean, do they become kind of invasive?
I have not, but they're not invasive in that they're native, but they can be aggressive. Particularly elderberry, as it produces, more shoots. If you feel that it is, my view is that they're not so aggressive that without some monitoring, you can't pluck out the new shoot coming. Though I'd be interested to hear more if you have noticed how aggressive it is in a particular area. It might be because it's planted in such a good area, it loves to grow. It's replicating itself so well. I have not noticed it.
Okay. Any crops you'd recommend planting with asparagus?
Oh. Not immediately next to the asparagus if you want to have asparagus more, because it will multiply. And so asparagus is best left in a separate bed or area so that you can get more of them. They're going to take a couple of years to actually come up. But once you've dedicated that bed, and in an urban area, you probably want to keep it in a raised bed and not let it go further because you have limited amount of space. I would recommend, if you want some annual flowers, which I'm not opposed to and I use, like marigolds, which are very easy to plant and have tremendous scent and will repel a lot of pests. Also, provided you have a dedicated bed for asparagus and it's not expanding, then you could plant some perennial herbs nearby. I recommend both of those.
Okay. Another listener asked, do you plan for climate change when you're selecting your plants or your trees?
Yes. Yeah. I'm actually doing a project with the University of District of Columbia and I'm growing lamb's quarters this year, which is a climate change lettuce spinach alternative. Right now, it won't winterize. It's an annual, but if the climate were to change enough, it could become a perennial. I'm experimenting with plants like Malabar spinach as well. Again, that looking for vegetables, let's say leafy greens that grow well in hot climates. Look to Africa, what kind of plants that they are growing. The university near me, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore, are doing a lot of experiments with these kind of leafy greens, and I'll be joining with some of them. Regarding trees, which are more of a concern, yeah, I mean, it could be a concern that some, say, apple trees in the future will be difficult to grow because we won't have enough chill hours. On the other hand, we would be able to grow what are now some zone 8 plants. In particular, in my area, my farm is currently zone B, but it seems like it's more like zone 8. In the last 2 years, Arlington has been zone 8 or 9. That doesn't change the zone. It just means that we haven't had temperatures below 10 degrees or even 20 degrees last year. And it's easier to grow trees like pomegranates. I'm growing a number of pineapple guava trees, which are zone 7, zone 8. Right now, I'm trying to plant them in a microclimate next to my house or maybe in my high tunnel. But maybe in a couple of years, that will be a tree. It's a small tree, 9 feet in height. It'd be a perfect tree to grow just wonderful tasting fruits. If it warmed up or if it was not quite as cold in this area, olive trees. So I think it's a good idea to keep an eye on that. Yes.
Yeah. Maria, do you know any resources for planning a small site like a 4-acre site?
I have several books that are listed at the end of this
Okay.
talk. Should I provide that as a handout? Would they have access to that later, Colleen?
They'll have access to the whole presentation. So if you have it at the end of this, that'll be available in about 2 weeks on our website.
Oh, okay, all right. So I'm going to add a list of books. I just put a few that I referenced, but there's actually some a number of good books that I can put in there. Sure. Now, also, YouTube is great to watch. A lot of people
Okay.
have permaculture videos.
All right, I think we can move on now, Maria.
Okay, thank you. Great questions. All right, let's talk about permaculture design. Permaculture design works with the available resources and conditions to maximize benefits for people and the planet with the least possible effort. That's my goal. This is a great photo, right? This is my permaculture orchard, and then right next door is all the corn growing. With permaculture design, we seek to build relationships between elements to maximize the benefit and save us time. So in our urban area, we've got a house. We can look at the drawing there. Consider where the winter winds are coming from. That will play, that's a factor in where you're going to be putting trees and other plants. Many plants don't appreciate high winds. Where's the summer sun coming? Then where's the winter sun coming? It comes from a different angle. You may want to create windbreaks around your house to help protect trees. As we saw in this last storm, it broke a number of tree branches. You want to use trees and shrubs to shade or not shade and provide a windbreak for your house. You want to locate your herb garden probably close to your front door for easy harvesting when cooking, but very importantly, you don't want to put that herb garden in the shade because they won't grow well that way. Place compost bins, tool sheds, trash nearby for convenience, and can create communities of plants that offer complementary benefits. It's a good idea to plan this out, even if you, most of us, you inherit a garden, but you can write out a plan before you start digging things up and cutting things down. Now here, this is a traditional 7-layer permaculture food forest. And I say traditional because I would not recommend it exactly this way in our climate. And there is a big error with this drawing as well. There's a tall tree layer with a walnut tree. The next layer, it provides some shade and protection for plants, and it's designed this way. The next layer would be a low tree layer, like an apple tree, or maybe two of them. Then below that are shrub layers, blueberry bushes and other shrubs that provide fruits. You have an herbaceous layer. Did you know that daylilies are edible? Ground cover layers, wood sorrel, that's also edible, and root layers. I was talking about those winter vegetables, turnips, that's a good place to put them, carrots, parsnips, and then finally a layer of grapes. Could be grown if it has enough sunshine. Instead of creating a separate trellis, you could trellis it up the tree. Now I say this is the original permaculture style design, but keep in mind that the author was Australian, and it's almost a tropical climate, which is different than our climate. It's not as warm, and also we don't have the sun in the summer months that our northern states, say Vermont does. We need to keep enough sun so that these fruit trees and shrubs will grow. Here's another drawing of the same, overstory, mid-story, wood understory. I'd recommend in our area, if you want to start from scratch and design the layers of the food forest, that you eliminate the large tree, the walnut tree, especially if it's like a black walnut, it will kill the apple tree. So you don't want to have that. So in an urban space, you might want to start with your largest tree as your fruit tree. It could be, and they get quite large. An American persimmon is quite a large tree, or an apple tree, and then have your shrubs, your woody shrubs, herbaceous layer, etc. below them. Here's someone's local garden as an example of a smallish tree that doesn't have the shrubs, the woody shrubs around them, but it has herbaceous perennials and herbs. One thing I want to point out is that you don't have to design your garden exactly as the books write. You want to design your own for your own particular climate, your own particular yard, and your own particular climate, including microclimate, and that will be different for everybody. So it's a good idea to put some thought and study into it so you don't make too many mistakes. We all make mistakes. But this is a different variation on that design, and it's a wonderful design. Now, just to mention that the tools and techniques we've been talking about are not unique to permaculture. Many of them are used in native planting. Many are taught in various courses that even we as master gardeners teach in our other courses. And permaculture as such, before it had a term, was used. These type of natural systems have been used by indigenous people around the world for millennia. And a variation of using only perennial plants, you can have a tapestry of annual vegetables. And I really like this idea. If you prepare a bed, not wood chips, so it's just the bare earth when you start out in spring, and then you could do one sowing. Rather than sowing beans all in a line and then lettuces all in a line, you can take all the plants that you want. In all the seeds that you want, and include, very important to include flowers such as marigolds to thwart the pests, and just throw it out, sowing it. And what comes up, one comes up. It mimics natural succession. Some early germinating plants will create habitats for others because you'll harvest them and others will come up. It'll densely fill up the garden bed. Now that's very important. You don't want exposed bare soil because first of all, it's very dry and it's going to require a lot of water, but it depletes the nutrients in the soil when you leave it bare. You either want to put a mulch around, even annual plants that you're growing, or as this picture just demonstrates so well, just densely plant them. And you can have a succession of harvest for most of the year. So I want to talk a little bit about design for small spaces, and then some people might have larger spaces, and I'll talk a bit more about farms there. Something that is commonly pictured when we talk about permaculture is a spiral. This is an herbal spiral, and it has mimics natural design, but importantly it expands the area vertically. The idea is that you start at the bottom, planting some of the herbs, and then you add soil as you go higher and the stones, so you can have quite a tall spiral at the end. But keep in mind that the ones at the top should be herbs that require less water, that are more Mediterranean type plants, such as rosemary. More examples of some very beautiful spirals people have done. There's even a little pond at the bottom of the one at the left there. You don't only have to put herbs in, you could put vegetables in. Another style is a keyhole garden. Again, the purpose of this is to save space. It's a horseshoe design with a central path. It maximizes planting space by reducing space devoted to paths in raised beds. You can use zone systems for different plants, like, for example, putting lettuces and others that you might want to visit daily, put them in the front row, and put other plants that don't need daily attention, like potatoes and carrots, in the back. But consider the orientation to the sun when you do this. Taller plants, you don't want them crowding out the sun. You want to put them to the north. Keyhole gardens here minimizes the path that you need, but you have full access to all your plantings. Mandalas. Now we have whole classes on vertical planting, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it's very useful in small lots, and you can plant your edible plants, fruits and vegetables. I really like this one, the trellis with squashes growing on them. I'm going to be using this in my orchard as the trees get bigger, because I have planted trees often 12 feet apart, and in some rows I'm going to do what's called espalier on the top left, when you train the branches to grow horizontally. Then you'll have some sort of cord to secure them, and eventually they become woody and remain that way. Another way is to span them, like in a fan, or you can grow them up a trellis or a wall. So in general, on this type of design, small yard, you want to establish where your zones are. See, you've got the house in the center, the plants out here, mixture of herbs, herbaceous, trees, other shrubs. You can develop some patterns. There's a number of books I'll put in the handout later that talk about different kinds of guilds that are good for companion planting next to each other. You want to think both vertically and horizontally and weave together plant functions for a strong and resilient garden. If you have a little more space, you can be looking more at an orchard or a larger design. In my orchard, for each fruit, I have some small fruit trees. You can see this was taken a year or so ago. They're bigger now. Each fruit tree, I plant 2 fruiting shrubs in the area or next to them, and approximately 10 to 15 perennials. Those perennials include herbs, bulbs, and flowers. Remember that permaculture means permanent agriculture, and the focus is on trees and perennials, which is what is the most part what I plant in here, though I will be planting some annuals. And I plant a comfrey plant behind each fruit tree. My orchard includes 18 different kinds of fruit trees. This is a small persimmon here. Plum, cherry, persimmon, elderberry, peach, nectarine, fig, apple, pear, mulberry, pawpaw, pineapple, guava, jujube, date medlar, Hardy orange, there's actually an orange tree you can plant. It's hardy down to zone 5, but it won't be as sweet as the oranges you buy in the store. Quince and apricot. And I have a few nut trees thrown in. So some of the nut trees will take a considerable time to the point where they can produce nuts. This is my pattern. There's a number of ways to do a pattern. The dark blue circles are where I have placed fruit trees. And there are 10 of them in this photo here. The yellow circles are where I'm putting the fruiting shrubs, approximately 2 shrubs per every tree. The light blue circles in going down the center with the N are the nitrogen fixing trees. The a very important concept in permaculture is to have a polyculture. And though I have multiple apple trees, I will never plant 2 apple trees together. I do not want to make it easy for the pests to hop from one apple tree to the next and eat up my trees and leaves. So you'll see I have 10 different trees planted in this area. And I will try to put them at least 3 trees apart. For example, if my first tree is an apple, my next tree might be a persimmon, the next one will be a fig, and then and only then will I plant another apple tree. The nitrogen fixing trees should go between the trees, and I found it convenient to put it in the middle. And in between the nitrogen fixing trees are where I'm planting, let's say, other perennials like I'll plant a lot of rhubarb in one area or artichokes in another, or I'll mix them. I wanted to give an example because permaculture often is practiced by people who are just doing it for themselves, which is wonderful. But there are also commercial farmers who practice permaculture style. One of them is Stefan Zepkowiak, who is based in Canada. He came up with a system since he's in the north. He can't grow all the trees that we do. He initially purchased an apple orchard, which was a monoculture as well. Many of the apple trees had died, and he knocked a number of them down. He's been in business for over 20 years. He has a pattern of 3. He calls it NAP. So the first tree will be a nitrogen fixing tree. He uses many honey locusts and those type of large trees. Then his second tree will be an apple tree, followed by a pear or a plum tree. He doesn't put 2 apple trees together either. Then after that pattern, it'll start again with an apple tree. He calls it planting in trios with 1 nitrogen fixer and then 2 crop trees. One of the initial permaculturists, David Holmgren, he also does this same type of pattern in his orchard. The pattern is that no fruit tree or even a nut tree is next to its own species in the same row or between rows. Therefore, if any tree gets infested with pests, it is much less likely to pass the problem on to another tree of its kind. For example, last summer, I found one of my, I don't know if it was a cherry tree, one of the trees was really infested with pests. But none of the other trees were, and none of the others of the same kind of tree were, because it wasn't anywhere near. And it's much easier to pick off the pests from one tree than to be spraying all your trees if it's a monoculture and they're all next to each other. Now, the thinking behind this is that although 1/3 of Stefan's orchard, if they aren't fruiting trees, he's mixing in nitrogen fixing trees. It's essential because it helps to create fertility. He doesn't need to add any nitrogen to his orchard. It eliminates the need for external inputs of fertilizer. It results in a circular ecosystem that virtually takes care of itself. Stefan has not added any fertilizer since 2007, and he's still going. He has a lot of YouTube videos. I recommend you looking them up, and it can teach you a lot. He uses honey locusts, so he will use different kinds of nitrogen trees than we do. I have a handout I believe you got. Take a look at it. It has a number of nitrogen fixing plants on it. And again, the primary goal here is to increase diversity while providing a diversity of crops to reduce or eliminate the use of fertilizers and to reduce or eliminate pest and disease control products. Now, that is really important. So this picture depicts, this is similar to Stefan's orchard and also mine, of what an orchard or a pattern could look like if you're able to plant, say, 10 trees. So looking at A, B, and C, they represent 3 different kinds of trees. Let's say apple, pear, and cherry. So you would go A, B, C, A, B, C. And then in between the rows of trees, you'll put nitrogen fixing trees. Between the alleys, I'm going to talk about that in a photo I have coming up. You could also put perennial plants. I'm planting strawberries in between mine, but I'll talk about that later. And there's a note for chop and drop at the bottom. That refers to, remember the slide when I talked about comfrey. If you have a comfrey plants, he has a lot of comfrey plants in one area that he uses or that others use. I intersperse them in throughout my orchard, but then you can cut them and just take them and drop the leaves on the base of all the trees. This is last summer, probably part of my yard. I think I'm trying to show some of the brambles and fruiting shrubs. I'm interspersing them between different trees, which again, in this area are fairly small. I've got hundreds of herbs now. The Virginia mountain mint grows very tall, but you can see rosemary, wormwood, salvia, lavender. There's a lot of comfrey growing. I showed in that panorama of the coreopsis flowers that I had in June, I allow flowers that pop up simply to stay. They are very good at keeping out weeds that I don't want until I have a purpose for that spot. I let these flowers simply grow. I let some of the grasses grow too if they're not if they're not invasive, because the birds are very useful to the birds, and I want birds in my orchard to eat the pests off the trees. Basil is an excellent annual to plant and intersperse between trees because although it's an herb, it's really got a scent that throws off a lot of pests. Interspersed between fruit trees are hundreds of small fruiting trees: blackberry, raspberry, blueberry, honeyberry, goji berry, sea berry. Oh, I didn't talk about aronia. Aronia is a shrub. Sometimes it's called chokeberry. It is native to our area. Many people have never heard about it. Again, you can get it from the Maryland State Nursery for a very good price. It's some aronia berry. I don't have a picture of it because mine aren't fruiting yet, but they produce a fruit similar to blueberry, but it has far more vitamin C and antitoxins than blueberry has. This is part of my orchard in winter, so you can't see the trees because they've lost their leaves. But this is an alley. I'm still developing this area. I mow this area. Initially, this alley I planted, you can see some clover in the middle. Planted clover to reintroduce nitrogen to the soil. In the middle there, you'll see I've got some landscape fabric, just a 3-foot section off the bottom. That's to keep weeds out that I will have for a while, and I'll be putting wood chips on top of that. Incidentally, wood chips are just a wonderful way to bring back nutrients to your system. I really do have it all over the orchard to suppress weeds, and also after a year that I saw the soil that was so depleted in this cornfield, but after the year, the soil is so much darker and richer because it had wood chips on top. Anyway, in this alley between trees, before they grow tall, I'm going to be growing rows of strawberries. So what I'm doing is I put down a 4-foot section of what's called contractor's paper. You could put cardboard or other paper down. And then rather than adding soil, I'll put wood chips on top. I do that because it's much easier to handle than wheel-bearing soil around. And also it suppresses weeds. In 6 months or so, that paper will have become soil, and I'll be able to plant strawberries in here in between the rows of orchard trees. Now, when the trees get bigger, it might be too shady to grow strawberries, but for the next 5 years, I think it's a good place to grow. And a little bit on insect management. See, rather than spraying and killing them, we call it management. Permaculture means using organic methods for pest control in a small garden. You can use organic sprays, use mulch, use chickens. I haven't talked about them because I don't have them yet, but I intend to get them. I know we can't have them in Arlington, but definitely want to attract birds to help you manage the insects. I should mention that there are many insects that are beneficial to us that will prey upon pests that will eat your fruits. So you don't want to be spraying and killing all the insects, because then you will eliminate some of your most powerful weapons. You want to encourage insects to visit by planting flowers and herbs they're attracted to. See, I like lantana, and I have it in a number of places on my property. Encourage birds to come and stay by putting out seeds for them. I also have snakes and frogs in my orchard. You're less likely to have a lot of them in Arlington, but if you have a pond or water source, you may very well get some frogs. And they eat the insects and small mammals that are a nuisance in your garden. I didn't plant these flowers. They came up by themselves. The corn farmer may have had I imagine that he had planted these flowers many years ago, probably more than 10 years ago, and they were still in the ground. And they came up because I don't spray, I don't apply any herbicide, so they were free to grow. And I mentioned I sometimes plant annuals in my permaculture orchard. There are pumpkins and tomatoes in here. We can't see them, but I'm going to be planting a number of tomato plants this year in the permaculture garden. They're hidden between the herbs. The benefit is that the annual vegetables are left alone by the pests because of the scent of the herbs, and the flowers throws them off. A year and a half ago, I planted a number of tomato plants. Just I grew a little. I planted them. They're tiny plants in the middle of my orchard. I wish I'd taken photos. I kind of forgot about them. And then when July or August, I went out to look at them, and all the tomatoes were there. No pests had touched them because they were right next to the wormwood and the Virginia mountain mint. Some organic methods you can use to fight pests are to intersperse herbs and flowers into your orchard and your vegetable garden. Have as wide a range of plants as possible. Remember that the greater the monoculture, the more pests you will have. That's the greatest way to have it, is to grow everything the same. If you need to use an organic spray, and you probably will, even with planting all these herbs and permaculture style, if you have trees that are not native to the area, such as the cherry, probably some of the apple trees, nectarine, apricot, etc. And there are a number of organic sprays that you could use. I'm going to be using and experimenting with kaolin clay this year. There is one called BT, that's very good for vegetables. There's also neem oil with a little salt mixed in, but keep in mind, you got to be very careful when you use any spray whatsoever, if they're organic. Any spray that touches a bee, a pollinator, will kill it. So it's recommended that you use these sprays before 6 in the morning, before they get up. The bumblebees are up very early in my orchard in the summer. First one's up. And in the spring, and you don't want to be spraying anywhere near them. Once it's sprayed and it's on the tree, then it's not going to hurt them. No, you just don't want to be getting them wet. You can also hang small jugs. I have here on this tree, this has some molasses and water in it. When really small holes, it would be to attract certain codling moth or certain kinds of moths, not big enough to have a bee go inside it. And again, it won't eliminate all the pests, but it will eliminate some of them. Have a water source nearby with ponds and ditches. Use thick mulch to suppress weeds and never use synthetic pesticides. Some of the other perennial vegetables I didn't mention: crossness, a Chinese artichoke. It's not in the picture here. Mine aren't big enough yet, but I'm growing them. These are some of the references I've used in this discussion, but I'll put out a handout that has recommended books for you. Okay, Colleen, that's the end of it.
All righty. Thank you, Maria. That was very comprehensive. There's two quick questions.
Yeah, sure.
Someone asked, is there a way to prevent comfrey from spreading? And can you use it with fig trees?
The way to spread it, stop it from spreading, is to dig it up and cut it back. Keep an eye on it. I have mulch, which I use wood chips, very thick wood chips. By the way, I don't use these perfectly cut ones. I get big, I get companies to arborists to bring me their large wood chips that degrade very slowly. That cuts down on a lot of spreading. And as to whether it can work near a fig tree, I don't know, and I'll get back to you on that.
All righty. And one thing I also had a question about, but so did one of our listeners. Can someone who is not a resident of Maryland purchase from the Maryland State Nursery, or do you have to be a resident?
You can purchase from them, yes.
Oh, okay, great.
It might cost a little more. I think there's a different cost for residents and non-residents.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
All right. Well, thank you, Maria. This was an incredible talk, very comprehensive, beautiful pictures, and I'm sure we all really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much. I didn't acknowledge the fact at the beginning that we have someone from Florence, Italy, and faraway places. It's one of the advantages now being able to do Zoom. I've lived all over, so part of my knowledge and observations comes from seeing a lot of different climates and cultures. And I am so happy that so many people have joined us. I encourage you to delve into this and learn more, because we can all do our bit and make a difference.